Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here with STN. We're glad you made it to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing. We'll also be having a green tip from our friends at Nuvve, a clean tech company helping schools intelligently electrify their fleets. A little later, I'll be talking with Kevin Matthews and Leslie Norgren from First Student about their new division, First Consulting. So looking forward to that conversation. But before we get to that, Mr. Ryan Gray is joining me. Ryan, welcome.
Hello, Tony. Hello, nation. Happy, I guess, what is this, the last full week of February? So getting closer to spring, it feels like, no matter what Puxatawny Phil said earlier this month.
That's right. I can't wait for winter to be over and spring to be sprung. So we're excited for that. But a lot happening this last week in school transportation. I know our own Taylor Hannon was down in San Antonio at the AASA conference, which is our friends, the superintendents, administrators conference, and they were making a big announcement, right, Ryan? And we were on site covering it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So they have the National Conference on Education. They were down in San Antonio this year. Taylor was there on hand for the awarding of the National Superintendent of the Year. That is sponsored by our friends First Student, as well as Corebridge, which is the new name of AIG, AIG Insurance and Financial, along with AASA, the Superintendents Association. And so, yeah, that was awarded on February 16th to Dr. Kevin McGowan of Brighton Central School District near Rochester, New York. Happens to be a First Student district, go figure. So congratulations to Dr. McGowan. He's going to be on the cover of our April magazine issue. So can't wait to see that. There's going to be an article on there. But in the meantime, you can find out a little bit more about Brighton Central School District, as well as the three other finalist school districts over at stnonline.com. Taylor has some articles up on some of those transportation operations, so you can get a sneak peek.
Wonderful. We'll look forward to that conversation and interviewing there. And there's a lot to unpack there. What makes someone the superintendent of the year? Like, there's got to be some really great accolades. So guys, go check that out on the website. I know, Ryan, you're going to be talking to Dr. Kerry Duskin. He's the transportation director at Roosevelt Elementary School, 66 in Arizona, and a frequent attendee at STN Expo. Mm-hmm. So really looking forward to that conversation as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was telling me he's looking for his fourth visit to Reno this summer. He said it would have been 5 except for COVID. But he's going to sit down with him, and really interesting guy. I've chatted with Kerry several times over the last couple of years in Reno, and I chat with him, of course, for the podcast, but also for an upcoming article on cloud hosting in the March issue. So we have have a great conversation lined up.
Awesome. Well, before we get to a few more headlines, I want to read you a message from TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing. Guys, you've heard us talk about their product FormFinder, which makes it easy to record and follow up on student behavior incidents on the bus. As TransFinder CEO Antonio Civitella says, data reveals patterns. FormFinder is embedded in TransFinder's Route Finder Plus solution, is included for free. Its uses go far beyond student conduct and can be customized for any form your district needs, like pre- and post-trip inspection, payroll, and so much more. In fact, TransFinder's clients have created more than 155 different types of forms using FormFinder and have submitted more than 1 million forms using the technology. Imagine one clearinghouse for all your district's forms. Guys, you can learn more by emailing getplus@transfinder.com or giving them a call at 800-373-3609. So Ryan, more headlines. We had some acquisitions in the contractor world happening. What's going on there?
Yeah, more expansion, more acquisitions. I know that our friends over at the National School Transportation Association, their data, they've been saying that, contracting is actually more approaching 40% of the industry. Certainly maybe something tied to the driver shortage. But so Beacon Mobility, it's been about the fourth largest contractor in the nation, 21 states that they're operating in. They added about another 1,000 plus vehicles this past week officially. They announced the acquisition of Huntington Coach Corporation, Huntington Coach LLC, Hendrickson Bus, and Dell Transportation. Those are all Long Island providers. So Tony, over the last couple years, we've seen, the number of Long Island companies kind of, at least operating as their own entities start to dwindle. I know, there was that Reliant Transportation that went belly up during the COVID, and New York City Department of Education acquired them. And now, Beacon is, put its stamp on the Long Island area. So like I was mentioning, a fleet of approximately 1,000 buses and vans, 1,000 employees. So definitely Beacon making some moves.
Yeah, that's exciting. I know our friend's First Student north of the border as well had an acquisition. I think it was in Quebec, Ryan. Is that right?
Yeah, Montreal, actually. The Dufresne Group. So they operate school transportation, coach, and transit passenger services. It's really expanding First Student's footprint there in Eastern Canada. So this is, Dufresne Group goes back to 1955. Again, a long-standing company. Of course, First Student, they operate under its Autobus Transco brand in the province of Quebec. So, increasing there north of the border. And I know you're going to be talking with First Student in a little bit. Obviously, a big leader in electrification. We know that is expanding north of the border as well. So, like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of expansion on the contractor side. And we've seen it, with the traditional bus angle. We've seen it with, of course, the alternative transportation angle around the driver shortage. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, I know, Ryan. There's also a lot happening in clean school bus funding as well. The Biden administration was urging legislators, senators to increase the budget, right? What was going on with that story?
Okay, well, that's actually a piggyback on a request for the fiscal year 23 budget that got approved before the beginning of the year. There was a group of senators, a lot of familiar names that have been on this clean school bus wagon. Alex Padilla out of California, Raphael Warnock, who won that hotly contested Senate race down in Georgia. And then on the House side, Tony Cardenas from California, Johanna Hayes from Connecticut. They've been really big advocates for this clean school bus program. And they had asked for $300 million in additional funding to that program for the 23 budget. That didn't go through, so they're back at it again, looking for fiscal year 2024 budget to add, again, another $300 million to that program. Of course, it's already $5 billion. But, a lot of the conversations that we were privy to, Tony, recently at the NSTA midwinter meeting was a talk around infrastructure and not being enough money. So, certainly this is just a letter to Administrator Regan there at the EPA. We'll see what happens with it. But I believe from what I'm hearing, both from the contractor side, from some of the folks at the infrastructure side, folks at, the policy level, that I think EPA is getting bombarded with a lot more information and requests. As more electric buses hit the road, we're seeing, a lot of the challenges come to the surface. And a lot of it has to do with infrastructure and the chargers and making sure all of these projects are, basically shovel ready, that they're ready to go. Construction has started. There's so much that goes into getting these school buses. So definitely a lot of pressure on the EPA right now. And like I mentioned to someone recently, it makes for just more interesting fodder for our upcoming Green Bus Summits this summer.
Yeah, we're hot and heavy on SC and Expo and Green Bus Summit. Guys, don't forget about the super early bird discount. You can save $200 on your registration for Indianapolis. That ends March 3rd. And for Reno, that's I think it's April 14th, Ryan, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, yeah. Head over to the website. It'll tell you. I'm all these dates, Tony. It's
everything's going everywhere, right? It's always we're busy. Well, the schedule's been updated. We've added a lot more agenda items. The educational schedule's been rounded out. Ryan's got some great topics up there. We've got our networking events, got sponsors. Trade shows are looking pretty full. So everything's headed in the right direction, guys. We'd love to see you this summer. Go to stnexpo.com to dive into that, learn a little more. And Ryan, really do appreciate your analysis on all the great stories. So much happening and some good interviews coming up. But before we get to that, we got a great green tip from our friends at Nuvve. They're a clean tech company helping school districts intelligently electrify their fleets. Nuvve offers a complete turnkey solution to help schools confidently electrify their fleets. They provide expert guidance through every step of the process, from selecting electric buses and recommending the best charging solution based on your district's routes, grant writing support, and flexible financing options too. With Nuvve, you'll enjoy the world's most intelligent charging, simple tools for transportation directors and drivers, and the opportunity to bring cleaner rides to your students and community today. You guys can get started by visiting them at Nuvve, that's NUVVE.com/STN. That's Nuvve.com/STN. All right, guys, coming up, we'll be talking with First Student. All right, guys, I'm super excited to welcome to the podcast friends of ours from First Student. We have Leslie Norgren, who's the VP of First Consulting, and also Kevin Matthews, an old friend of the podcast, who is the head of electrification over at First Student. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Absolutely. So, Leslie, let me start with you first. Can you tell me a little bit about First Consulting? Because our audience knows First Student is the largest contractor in the country. They hear the ads on our podcast, how you transport more kids than anyone and more than any U.S. airline combined, which is just an enormous feat, right? So tell us what First Consulting is as part of that First Student ecosystem.
Absolutely. We are really excited to be launching First Consulting, as we are able to use our expertise to provide transportation solutions to the challenges that you, our potential customers and school districts, are facing today. And if you think about the challenges that we're all facing, right? It's around fleet electrification, around routing issues, around safety concerns, maintenance support. We're able to conduct a comprehensive assessment, and then we can identify areas for improvement and develop customized solutions. And as you said, Tony, as the largest provider, we're able to leverage those internal expertise and those subject matter experts. And for example, as you said, we have Kevin here today with us, and we can tap into his expertise in electrification.
Yeah, Kevin, you want to kind of talk to us a little bit more about the fleet electrification side, because that's obviously the topic du jour out there in school transportation land with all the EPA funding. Round 2's coming up. I'm sure your phones are ringing off the hook for people that need help, right?
Yes. And so as we began to, unpack our approach to electrification, we really began to realize that we had developed an internal expertise related on everything from applying for grants to developing charging infrastructure to route assessment to deploying buses. And we had our own, approach we developed internally that was pretty efficient. And then we began to realize others could benefit from this approach, particularly those who are non-First Student customers on our school bus services. And so we wanted to offer our expertise to school bus operators so they could see how we did it. And I think the big thing that really drove us to this was not so much, we wanted, new business, but we began to see in the marketplace people who were offering to assist school districts really were not operators. There were utility type entities and charging infrastructure people and, finance type entities, but no one who had to confront the exact same thing school bus operators had to face of delivering children every morning safely and bringing them home every afternoon. And that's the way we approach our business. So we figured we could offer our approach to those who do the exact same thing we do and be successful at it.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of need because when I talk to people, everybody talks about the need to kind of set up infrastructure and all the mechanisms and all the nuance to that. You want to share anything about maybe a successful project you're working on or something that kind of helps our audience get more clarity on kind of the depth of the knowledge you guys are bringing to the table to help them?
The near-term projects for electrification really relate to school districts that have won recent rebates from the US EPA, suddenly realized infrastructure was the issue, not the school buses. And so really working with them to show how they can, design an infrastructure system that will meet their needs to, get children back home every day and make the buses perform the way they should, but also in a cost-effective manner. And so that's what we're really seeing in the short term, near term of our results, at least as it relates to our electrification consulting business.
Excellent. And Leslie, kind of question for you. You mentioned some other things like bell time changes, routing, efficiency. Can you share a little more about maybe some projects that you're working on with First Consulting that you're kind of helping districts achieve the goals they need to get over the finish line with all the challenges they're faced today?
Sure. I think in addition to electrification, a good example was a district that we recently partnered with that was struggling with driver shortage, which maybe right after electrification discussion is driver shortage, as we're all struggling in today's labor market. And in this case, the district was actually not able to provide transportation to all their students. They had management concerns, they had process concerns, and clearly had routing concerns. So our team went in, conducted an assessment of the entire operation and pinpointed the ways that we could adapt their program. Through our recommendations, they were able to help eliminate any students that were not receiving transportation, reduce the number of drivers needed through more efficient routing, remove the need for office staff to get behind the wheels, which then improves communication right to their community, to their parents. And now all of the students have transportation in that particular district.
Can you share a little bit more about the routing component? Because I know First Student has a very centralized routing over your own fleet. How does that kind of work with the clients that you're interfacing with? How are they taking advantage of kind of your economy of scale with that?
Sure. There's, I'd say, 3 levels of approach. So some districts want us just to come in and try to optimize what they're already doing. And then in many cases, there's a need to improve on the technology and upgrade and create a system build. And then in other cases, districts may look at us and say, we just want you to manage our routing services. So we can adapt and customize based on the customer's needs.
Yeah, and with respect to driver shortage, we've seen obviously a reaction to that is changing the tiering system, going from 1 tier to 2 tier, from 2 tier to 3 tier. And so you guys are making that process more seamless as well, correct?
Correct. And then there's always the discussion around bell time changes, right? Sometimes a simple change of 10 or 15 minutes, right? It takes socialization with your community. There's other stakeholders in terms of the staff at the school. But sometimes a change like that also, right, is the other level to optimizing your routing.
Got it. So what would be kind of a next step if somebody was interested in engaging you? They're thinking, hey, I could use some help with some of these things that you have to offer, bell time changes, driver shortage, electrification. How do they kind of engage you guys? Because that's a pretty wide swath of things you're doing.
Yeah, the simplest way to get a hold of us would be to email us at consulting@firststudentinc.com or visit our website, which is www.firststudentinc.com/consulting. And you can find out more about our consultants and our projects.
Beautiful. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I know you're live from San Antonio at the AASA conference where Superintendent of the Year was announced. We talked about it a little earlier on the podcast. So congratulations to you guys. I know you've supported AASA for many years, and it's very exciting to see the outcome be a customer in Rochester, New York winning. So very exciting stuff. We're very happy for you guys. We appreciate our partnership.
Well, thanks, Tony. We'll always make time for you and appreciate all you do to get the good word out in the industry. And so thanks for your time and letting us present what we're doing now in consulting.
And I'll just follow up with thanks again and allowing us to introduce First Consulting to your listeners.
Absolutely. We appreciate you guys. All right, next up, Mr. Ryan Gray is talking to Kerry Duskin. Ryan, take it away.
We're happy to be joined now by Dr. Kerry Duskin of Roosevelt Elementary School District number 66 in Phoenix, Arizona. Kerry, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too as well, Ryan. Glad to collaborate with you a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm saying see, of course, I would remind the audience every week we get to see each other. Here, everyone else is listening to our wonderful voices. Kerry, like I said, it's good to see you. I've been, you're a familiar face from Reno, from STN Expo. How many years now have you been going?
So I've been going to Reno 3 years. I think it would have been 5 without COVID.
Gotcha. Yeah. So hopefully we get to make it a 4th year.
Yes.
This July.
I will be there.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So lots of stuff to talk about, obviously. One of the things I always do when I have a guest on and I'm preparing, and I knew that you had doctor in front of your first name. A lot of times I just always assume it's an educational doctorate. But I looked in a little bit more, and it's actually a doctorate in theology that you have, and that you're actually a senior pastor there in the Phoenix area. Tell us about that.
So I've been in ministry since I was 19 years old. And I've been pastoring churches. I think I was 25 when I started pastoring. Moved to Arizona from Louisiana to take over a church here in Arizona. And thought I was going to be here for a year. It's been 7, and I'm still here.
Mm-hmm. So what's the name of your church?
Love Center Church.
Love Center. I like that. Yeah. And then, of course, you have another church where you're coming from right now, your office there at Roosevelt Elementary School District. I was kidding you earlier. Kind of, you're tending to a different kind of flock, right?
Yes, definitely. And believe it or not, I try to do like encouraging moments. Every day we have a scrolling board, and I try to put a positive message on the board every day for the staff here, just to let them know that, hey, we get it. Everything's going on. We're still here to support you. We're still behind you. Just encourage them, with a little short phrase or something. I think the one I have up now is like, remember, everyone needs a little bit of love. You're the first person the child sees and the last person they see. So a simple, hello, how you doing, would definitely make their day.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of the things that I was actually just having a conversation with several transportation leaders the other day, as we're looking to our Transportation Director of the Year award that we give each year. So much, we're talking about technology, and we'll get there in a second. Don't worry. But electric buses, propane buses, the driver shortage, which again, we'll get there in a second. But sometimes it's easy to lose sight on the kids. That's why you guys are here, right? That's why you have these yellow buses. That's why you have your drivers and all that training. It's to provide that service and do so in the best way possible to help those kids, right?
Absolutely. We look at it in our district. We're predominantly Title I school district, so it's considered low poverty level. So a lot of our kids, the only good thing they get is the smile from the bus driver. Mm-hmm. And the enjoyment that they get for riding bus. I have kids because I drive every day. And one of the schools I drive for, my kids every day when they're getting on the bus or getting off the bus, my little kindergartens and first graders, they stop and give me hugs every day. And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. When they first started, I was like, hold up, but then it became an everyday thing. And it's like they look forward to the hugs, the fist bumps, the high fives when they're getting on and off the bus, so it's like it gives me enjoyment to see them interacting and then really not worrying about their situation, but enjoying the moment.
So you mentioned it's a high Title I. There's probably a lot of children that are taking advantage of free or reduced lunch programs, breakfast maybe. Tell us a little more about the district. So you're in the Phoenix area. How many students are you transporting? How many buses in your operation? How many drivers?
So Roosevelt is in what we call South Phoenix. We have roughly about 85 to 8,700 kids that are enrolled in our district. We're transporting about maybe 3,000 of those kids on an everyday basis. With the bus drivers right now, we have 13 bus drivers. If I remember correctly, off the top of my head, trying to remember, 13 bus drivers, but we have 15 van drivers. And through that whole process, they're transporting everyone that's within our district. We used to transport our out-of-district schools. We can't even do that at this point because of the driver shortage. So we've contracted those students out. And because we've contracted them out, it helps us in that sense.
Yeah, because I know there's a state law now that allows you guys to utilize the vans. And, obviously we've seen a big rise in all these different alternative transportation companies or transportation network companies, kind of that rideshare model. Are you using any of those?
Yes, we utilize the Everdriven and Hop Skip Drive are our predominantly companies that we use to transport our special needs students and our McKinney-Vento students that we cannot transport in-house.
Yeah, I wrote an article about one of your local districts last year about that A for Arizona program. I don't know if you guys have, that grant program that was set up by former Governor Ducey several years ago, looking at that kind of, new model of education and increasing the opportunities. So lots of money out there with that as well. I think if you go to stnonline.com, and I think if you even search for A for Arizona, that might come up from last year. But, we're mentioning the disadvantaged economic area that you're in. Certainly we're coming to the close here in the next week or so of Black History Month. And still, disproportionately, a lot of the low income, predominantly neighborhoods, people of color. I would imagine that, in your area, you have quite a large number of your student population that falls within that. And I'm curious, being a man of color yourself, being a pastor, and kind of, back to the tending to the flock, and you're mentioning the kindergartners, first graders, kind of curious, as we kind of wrap a bow on Black History Month too, were there any initiatives that you guys brought forth this month, or kind of is it, something throughout the year that you're trying to do for not only your students, but also your employees as well?
So Roosevelt, every year during Black History Month, they celebrate Black history on all of our campuses. Each campus will put on a Black history program, and they'll commemorate someone from the Black history. I'm not sure what they've done so far this year as far as that's concerned on our campuses, but it's a known fact that they do something every year. Normally, they would do it and present at our governing board meeting, which is usually at the beginning of the month, but we have once a month board meetings now. So I'm sure they'll highlight what happened during Black History Month at our next board meeting, showing what each campus did and how that happens. Our district is a mixture. So we do a lot of different things here. As far as in the transportation department, we haven't really done anything specifically geared toward Black history, but we are, because it's Love the Bus Month as well. Mm-hmm. We're celebrating Love the Bus Month. And going back to the little phrases I was talking about earlier, I put the little phrases up, especially when we started Love the Bus Month. And it was like, Love the Bus Month? Never heard of that. I'm like, now you have.
Mm-hmm. I was going to make that point. It's Black History Month and Love the Bus Month.
Yes.
Speaking of your drivers too, and, we were talking about you being a pastor and whatnot. So, the driver shortage, and you alluded to it. So can you take us kind of through what that actually looks like? How many drivers are you short? And maybe we can talk a little bit about, mentoring.
Okay.
How you guys are looking for drivers, how you're identifying new applicants, kind of, and how you're fostering maybe who you have now on staff, try to make them the leaders of tomorrow.
So pre-COVID, I had approximately, I want to say about 40-something drivers, 42, 43 drivers pre-COVID. When COVID hit, we lost a lot of drivers because the majority of the drivers, as you know, in the school bus industry are seniors. So I lost a lot of my drivers during COVID because they were afraid to come back because of everything that was going on. So it caused us to downsize a lot. So we ended up downsizing, and routes that we were doubling, we ended up consolidating those routes this year. We also started in our district, we started an online academy. So a lot of our kids whose parents were not comfortable with them returning to campus go to our online academy. So that kind of helped alleviate a lot of the students that we were transporting to be able to consolidate routes. So what we've done in consolidating those routes, the district has also started giving our drivers what we call a retention stipend. If they stay through the end of the year, they'll get an X number of dollars given out to them. In the beginning of the year, if they return, they'll get 2 installments that's given to them. They'll get something in September, then another one in December if they stay. So for the most part, we've been fortunate enough to keep those that we have left from COVID. We've been able to keep those drivers here. And I think the stipend has played a real good part there, letting them know that they appreciate it and staying, and then to get an extra check in the summer that you really wasn't expecting, I think really helps out a big deal.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. In regard to that as well, obviously, I mentioned it earlier, technology, and I want to start now talking a little bit about technology. I actually speak with you for an article coming up in March, so just about a week or so away. It's going to be hitting stnonline.com, and then, of course, in the mail shortly thereafter. But talking about cloud computing or off-premises hosting, which I've been, corrected by our friend Antonio Civitella at TransFinder. I know you're a TransFinder client. You talked to me a little bit about the cloud and just technology in general. When you arrived at Roosevelt about 5.5 years ago or so, they had nothing, right? And that was just a shock to you.
Yeah. So I've been here 6 years, almost 7 years here at Roosevelt, and they were still in what I call the archaic ages, where they were still doing everything paper and pencil, Google Maps. So it was a surprise to me that they didn't have any sort of technology that could help with routing. So I started searching for routing stuff when I was at my previous district to kind of move things along here. So we settled on TransFinder. We liked what TransFinder had to offer and everything. And we chose the hosting feature through them versus hosting it through our district. It cost a little more for them to host it, but I felt it was more feasible for us at that point to have them do it. That way we didn't have to get a dedicated server just to house TransFinder stuff. And if our server went down or this computer crashed, then we'd have a problem because we couldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. So I looked at it from that standpoint, because we know how technology is and we know computers have minds of their own. They want to work today and don't want to work tomorrow. But someone who's been in the industry as long as TransFinder, if one goes down, they have another one that'll pick it up, and it keeps us going, mm-hmm. And then with all the new technology that TransFinder has rolled out, we went from their pro environment into their plus environment. And I love the plus environment more. I thought I loved the pro until I was introduced to plus. And when I got in TransFinder Plus, it's like all the things I can do there really made me really think like, wow, where's this been? Mm-hmm. Y'all been hiding this from us.
The whole artificial intelligence optimization, that kind of, being able to do things on the fly, is that what's really...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of other, so I know that, with the cloud, you said you recently 100% went to the cloud, at least for the routing software. What other technology are you looking to implement? Because again, you said 5-6 years ago, they had nothing. So we got routing, check that box. What's the next thing on your menu?
So with us, I went all in the very beginning. We went with the routing software. We went with student tracking on every bus, everything from the very beginning. We just switched our radio systems 2 years ago to cellular service because we had done a lot of field trips and stuff that was going up to the Grand Canyon, into Ojai, California.
Wow.
And we wasn't able to communicate with our drivers. And of course, driving this bus, they're not allowed to use their cell phones while they're driving. So when we switched, that helped a great deal for us, switching to a cellular service versus the analog service. and we were able to still communicate with our drivers, and our drivers were able to communicate with us. So we went all in.
Okay.
All in, and now we're at that point to we're upgrading what we already had. You know, it's like getting a little old. So now we've upgraded to the most updated version of those programs.
Okay, great. So you're running tablets in your buses, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yes, we're running tablets through Synovia.
Okay, and so there you're doing you have the student ridership. I like to call it student ridership because some people, the tracking, you know, has an issue. Some people have it with, but you have the student ridership. You have the routing. Is it turn by turn direction? It's, you know, basically kind of that whole nuts and bolts for the drivers.
Yes, so we don't utilize the turn by turn feature just yet. With Arizona, the rules are so finicky here. So we have to be careful how we utilize those, the GPS talking features, I should say. So right now, if we have a sub driver that's doing a route, you know, we'll give them a route sheet. For the most part, my average kid is on a bus 10 minutes from home to school. My longest bus route is probably 30, 35 minutes. And that's because we go into another district to transport students there. So our kids are not far. So it's not hard for a driver. We give them a route sheet and say, hey, do these stops. They can just go out and do them.
Okay. Now, what about alternative energy? So obviously there's tons of talk about electric buses. You've been in those sessions in Reno, propane buses. What are you guys running right now? Are you gas, diesel? And what are you looking to maybe go toward here in the next several years?
So currently we have diesel, and we started purchasing propane buses about 5 years ago. We started with 2, and we've increased that number. So we have a mixture of diesel and propane. Looking at the electric side of it, we've been in those conversations to next get into a situation where we can acquire an electric bus. For a person like me who was strongly against electric buses in the very beginning, after sitting through some sessions and going to some EV sessions and listening to everybody talk about the electric, and then being able to drive one for myself, I kind of changed my whole outlook. And my facilities director, he kind of pushed me to change because he's like, we need to get in this electric bus deal. So we started that process there.
Okay. So are you looking at a clean school bus program? I would imagine that you're probably one of the prime candidates for that priority that they have.
So we did the grant. We did not make it into the first running. So when they have another one coming out, I believe March. So we'll apply again. Even though we met all the boxes because it was a lottery, you know, it was
it's luck of the draw. Yeah.
Luck of the draw.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, you know, as you're probably aware, like, you know, I'm sure you're your facilities director, you guys are looking at like your parking lot and all the construction and the utilities and all the infrastructure. It's a ton to take a bite out of and chew on. So, of course, we're going to have a lot of those conversations at our Green Bus Summits in Indiana and STN Expo East, Indianapolis on June 4th, and in Reno at STN Expo West on July 16th. Dr. Kerry Duskin, now that I know you're a doctor, I'm going to see you this summer. I'm going to say, doctor, come over here and
turn around and look at you.
Yeah, he'd be like, what? It's great catching up with you. I look forward to seeing you in Reno, or hey, maybe somewhere else too. You never know. But
yes, sir.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate your time and sharing with us all your knowledge and what's going on there in Phoenix.
All right. Thank you. I enjoyed being here.
A special thanks to our guest today, Dr. Kerry Duskin. Thank you so much for jumping on with Mr. Ryan. Great conversation. Appreciate Leslie and Kevin from First Student being on as well. Really enjoyed learning a lot about First Consulting from First Student. Thanks to our sponsors, TransFinder and Nuvve and First Student for being on. Couldn't do it without you. Guys, visit stnonline.com for the latest everything happening in the school transportation industry. And make sure and register for STN Expo this summer. Go to stnexpo.com for all the details. Make sure and save $200 on your registration as well. Get that super early bird savings. Lock that in. Guys, remember to subscribe to the podcast. Put it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Go to your cell phone, type podcasts, find us on there so this podcast ends up in your phone every week so you can enjoy it every week. The Nation, we love you. We'll see you next week.